Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to our Airbus Session featuring a commercial program update together with our Chief Commercial Officer and Head of International, Christian Scherer, and our EVP, Head of Programs and Services, Philipp Möhr. My name is Stefan Schaffrath. I'm heading the External Communication Department at Airbus for Airbus Commercial Aircraft, and it's my pleasure to run you through the event today. Regarding the run-through, we have two presentations by Christian and Philipp, followed by a Q&A session. You can load the Q&A session as follows. You have the Q&A icon on the WebEx tool, and you can later on also live raise your hand, and my team in the background will select your question and put it forward to our presenters here on the podium. After the event, we will upload a special website, airbus.com, on our newsroom, and this will feature the whole presentation, the replay, infographics, photos, facts and figures, everything which is helping you with illustrating your articles. In case you come to any technical issue during the live, you can put your technical issue forward also via the chat function, send it to the host, and we will at the backstage do everything to solve your issue. All the team is ready to stand by for your questions later on, and now, without any further ado, Christian, it's my pleasure to hand over to you with your presentation.
Thank you, Stefan. Philippe, pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. Remotely, unfortunately, still. I will show you some data, some pictures. First of all, reflecting a little bit on the management of the crisis, and then, of course, I can't refrain from trying to sell you a few airplanes before handing over to Philippe. So, yeah, what happened? No need to dwell on it too much. This industry, in a matter of a year, has lost something like 15, if not more, years of growth. We all know it. The crisis has been totally unprecedented. We realized it in, well, let's be honest, about March last year. We realized this was more seismic than anecdotal, and have adjusted in a little over a year. You may remember this curve from this particular chart from many a presentation over the years. We are fundamentally confident that our industry is resilient, that it will recover, but at this point, we're not quite out of the woods yet. So what have we done? What have we done when we realized this actually in March? I remember it vividly, March 12. Last year, I was en route to join one of your illustrious publications for an award ceremony, actually, in Washington, where we got the award for the 321 XLR launch. And unfortunately, we commonly decided to interrupt it on March 13. Philippe and I spent a couple of days wondering what the effect would be. And literally within, I want to say 10 days, Philippe, our company has made very rigorous decisions. We have analyzed every one of the airplanes with every one of our customers in our forthcoming backlog, short-term, medium-term, of course, longer-term as well. And we came to the conclusion before the end of March that we would deliver approximately 570 airplanes. Quite a bit of controversy internally. My role, of course, in the company was to pull when others perhaps were more on the brakes. But by and large, yes, we delivered 566 airplanes last year, which came after the decision to scale down our production by a significant amount, as you know, about 40% on the single aisles, and a little bit more than that on the wide bodies. Nonetheless, over the course of 2020, we held up that level of deliveries. We took some orders balancing some gross orders and very, very limited cancellations, so that we ended up with a backlog comfortably above 7,000 airplanes. You can see here on this particular chart the distribution through the months. You can clearly see us falling off a cliff in deliveries in March, April, May, and then gradually recovering as we reworked every one of our contracts. I mean, I literally mean every one of them, save for one or two perhaps, with a distribution around the globe. You can see it here: North America, Europe, Asia Pacific in this case, including China and India, a distribution that by and large reflects the worldwide presence of our products. Now, this adjustment we talked about did not leave the backlog as it was before. As I mentioned, every one of our contracts was reworked more or less vigorously. About 80% of the near-term aircraft delivery positions got moved. I mean, thousands of airplanes got moved around in the planning, but in the end, we did deliver those 566 airplanes. And as you know, this year, I don't think it's a scoop, Philippe, we're en route to doing at least that. We're just clocking past maybe the mid-200s or so as we speak. We also invented a number of rather novel solutions to actually be able to interface with our customers in the pandemic with restricted air travel and connectivity, obviously. We did 150 eTOTs, electronic TOTs, virtual aircraft delivery acceptance procedures based on the digital tools that we developed very quickly. We installed safe corridors for customer inspectors to come here, to be catered in a safe corridor, to be transported back and forth to their airplanes, and the delivery centers to be accommodated in our hotel here at the Airbus Leadership University in Toulouse, but other places around the world as well. So we adapted fairly quickly, and I insist on this because it kind of shows how our industry and our company in particular is able to handle and manage even the most drastic of crises. Now, what's going to happen in the markets, globally speaking? We all know the domestic markets have stabilized, not quite on the aggregate around the world, reached their pre-pandemic levels, but we're about at 80% compounded global average around the world, with the China and the US leading the way, the domestic traffic in those very large geographies leading the way, really pulling the rest of the industry up. You can see the overall total, that's the dotted blue line on this particular chart here, is at about 50%. So we're half of what we used to be, or our customers are operating half of what they used to operate. And international, of course, dragging behind, currently standing at about 27% of 2019 levels. That kind of reflects the industrial adjustment that we've made, Philippe, with about minus 40% or so on the single aisles as quickly as we could, and more minus 50% or so on the wide bodies. We do believe, if we now look to the future, you can imagine that a company like ours, with many of our stakeholders, is trying to model the corridor of recovery, because yes, we are in a recovery. In the future, we do see the window of, let's call it, equilibrium of pre-pandemic level coming back in the 2023 to 2025 timeframe. 2023 most probably on the short and medium ranges, more the domestic traffic, the international traffic coming back a little bit later. So in that period of time, we should be back to where we were when we realized in March of last year that we were facing a tremendous earthquake here for our industry. This is not really particularly new. We're refining it as we go along. We now have found a methodology where we can actually try to anticipate the regulatory measures that governments will take as a result of the pandemic's metrics. So we do think we now have a pretty solid ground to stand on to expect the quote-unquote recovery in that window. I said I was going to try and sell you some airplanes, so here we go. Yeah, why do we feel at Airbus that we do stand on solid ground and we can actually prepare well for the so-called recovery? We believe so because we fundamentally have very contemporary and forward-looking technological solutions and products. The 220, if we move up in size, starting with the single aisles and the A220. We're very, very proud of the latest member of our family, the A220. As you know, it's built in Canada and of late also in the United States. We have therefore a product that starts at a 100-seater. We had a very timid attempt in the past with the A318 in this category, but we now have a family of products with the 220-100 and 300 that clearly addresses the upper regional segment where Airbus was not really present before. The A220 is absolutely the reference in terms of cabin comfort with its very, very smart 5-abreast configuration that we've inherited from Bombardier. In terms of cabin, for those who have not experienced a 220 cabin yet, it's truly the airplane of the future. I encourage you to go and take a look on that cabin. Uncomparable to other regional or smaller medium-range jets. As a consequence, that airplane commands higher customer value. It integrates quite nicely in the phasing of A320s and A321s with 20 to 30 seat increments, nicely spaced in the Airbus product family. And not surprisingly, the airplane has had commercial liftoff and expanding its customer base, including in the foreseeable future. Some more. We have not decreased production on the A220. We've adapted slightly downward the positive slope of the ramp-up, but there was no decrease even through this pandemic. 25% fuel burn and therefore CO2 emissions improvement versus the former generation small, medium-sized and small-sized jets in the regional or in the mid-market segments. Fly-by-wire airplane, perfectly integrated in the Airbus family. So much for the 220. Well, no, not so much for the 220. Here's more. I'm sorry. The range advantage that we should point out on the 220 is one that helps us provide, for those of you who are a little bit familiar with the way we market airplane and the payload range graphs, it provides an increased integral of productivity and revenue generation capability for our customers, and therefore this airplane clearly commands a value premium in the market, all the more that it's very, very marginally higher trip costs because it's a bigger airplane. It's about 20 seats or so, 20, 30 seats more than its direct competitor. Well, that carries a slight trip cost penalty, but offers so much reward in terms of extra revenue generation capability that it's a very, very easy risk-reward decision to make for our customers. And therefore, yeah, that's what we market the airplane for. It's seat cost advantage, uncomparable with the airplane it competes with primarily, which would be the Embraer E2 jets. Not to mention the comfort, which I did previously. Now, going up, moving to the bigger brother, the A320, we have this rather proud title there. Hope you forgive us for that, but it's a statement of fact. Ladies and gentlemen, the A320 is the most successful aircraft family ever. Why? Because there are more A320s flying at the peak of the flights, which is going to be recovered soon. There will have been more A320s flying in the world than 737s, all types combined. So it is clearly today the most successful single-aisle airplane out there. Why is it? Because it brings new, it has brought and continues to bring new and advantages to the market, higher customer value. It is a better cabin. We have not just a seat count advantage, but we have a fuel burn advantage. We have a maintenance cost advantage. We have a cargo capability, containerized capability, which is not the case on other airplanes. And yeah, I don't even want to dwell on other value drivers that may have dented and therefore reinforced the value difference between an A320, which is a fly-by-wire airplane, continuously improved over time and with continued improvement still, compared to a competing airplane of the 1960s and non-fly-by-wire generation. Other advantages we do see, ladies and gentlemen, in the world market that are factual and not just the grand statements of the Airbus sales organization. We have higher reliability through the integrated systems of this digital age aircraft. In the engines, which have a higher bypass ratio, run cooler and therefore have lower maintenance costs and lower fuel burn. All of that brings us to a value proposition difference of the A320 and its bigger brother, the A321, that is deep into the double-digit millions of dollars per unit compared with its competitor. Not surprisingly, therefore, we have a situation out in the market, referring back to the pandemic. We have a situation where our supply and our demand is nicely matched, and therefore we can continue to command that value in the marketplace without having, as a matter of fact right now, any unsold inventory in the near and medium term. Actually, to me, the commercial guy, that's a bit of a frustration, Philippe, because I'd like to have a few more airplanes to sell. This is just a little illustration, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, of the way the A320neo has held its value through the crisis. If you look on the left, January 2020, this is the average appraised value pegged at 100% of these 5 reputable aircraft appraisers. That value has held right through the crisis, even in the worst trough of the crisis, where everybody was saying, oh my God, airplane values are falling off a cliff, etc., etc. No, the value, the perceived value of that A320 is held right through the worst aviation crisis. That tells us that this is the plane of reference and the price leader in its market. As we move on through the segments, you can see on the left the A321, on the right the A330neo. Now we're in the middle of the market where we have a seamless transition between a single-aisle aircraft offering longer range capability than previously and the wide-body airplane catching the operating cost of the single aisle, both matching, as illustrated here by our friends at TAP, both airplanes being deployed in medium-range sectors, sometimes in the high season, the wide-body airplane, or in the peak hours, in the lower season or off-peak hours, the single-aisle airplane covering the same network with cross-crew commonality, a unique feature of Airbus's product offering, and, as you know, of Airbus's philosophy of bringing operators savings and efficiencies throughout the whole family. So range and capacity flexibility through the increased range of the A321 in particular, and that commonality which allows airlines now to offer in the middle of the market a 30% reduction compared with what they used to be confronted with in former times when you did not have that seamless integration of products. Alongside the increased range of a single-aisle airplanes comes the cabin comfort. We mentioned it before, the A320, through its wider fuselage, and better noise signature as well, is offering a cabin comfort that other single-aisle aircraft can't offer. This is it's not a doctored picture. It's an actual picture of the A321XLR airspace cabin. You know, I often get the question, some of you have heard it before, the question, would you really want to sit in a single-aisle airplane for 7 hours or so? And I thought, I didn't invent it myself, but I use the line all the time. You know, people were saying, well, my favorite airplane to fly long range, you know, when we were kids was the 747 and the upper deck of the 747. Well, you know, up there in the bubble. Well, guess what? There's more space in an A321 than in the upper floor of the 747 bubble, in which we all enjoyed our first intercontinental travel experiences, didn't we? So we now have a really state-of-the-art, very sexy cabin introduced just recently by our friends at JetBlue on the LR version, not even the XLR version, which is going to come to market in 2024, right on time. Right, Philippe? So, moving on. As we continue, we also have a seamless, continue up the segments, we also have a seamless transition in the long-range offering. You can see here Delta, that through its huge network, operating both A330neos, which I remind you has a range capability of up to 8,000 nautical miles, and the A350, which is the only clean sheet long-range, ultra-long-range, and high-capacity wide-body airplane in the market today. So here again, seamless transition, cross-crew qualification between the two airplane types, very, very low seat cost proposition with the A330, particularly as you densify it for medium ranges, and then an absolute unique payload range capability of the A350, and therefore fuel consumption capability of the A350 where it matters most, which is on the long and ultra long sectors. So as we look at these wide bodies, you can see here the A330, which Airbus is really offering as being the unit cost champion, sitting right there in the middle of the market. You might say, yeah, but you just said, Christian, new airplanes for long range. Correct. That's why we have the A350 and not a derivative airplane at the top range, where where technology brings its most value when you fly 14 hours or so over ultra long range distances. Why did we do the Neo? Well, the Neo is there because the A330 is the most widely distributed wide-body aircraft in the skies today. 1,500 A330s out there. And the Neo, what does the Neo bring? Through its new engines, new wing, new restyled cabin, new cabin, it brings a 15% step in the right direction of more sustainable flying in a market where you already have 1,500 sister ships flying, waiting to be replaced by that 15% gain in efficiency. In today's world of increased sustainability pressures, etc., 15% is quite sizable. Now on to the A350, as I said, where the efficiency of technology matters most. Yeah, it's when you fly 300, 350 passengers over these ultra-long distances is where the fuel burn and the maintenance cost, but mainly the fuel burn matters so much more. That's where you want to have your clean sheet design airplane. Look at this. I find that the most telling example or the most telling argument we can use whenever you take off with an A350 compared with a 777, old or new, you will take off with 45 or so tons less weight, 45 tons less weight on every mission as you fly across the oceans. And, you know, a good quarter, sometimes up to a third of that delta in weight is, you know what? Fuel, just fuel. So it's on these long-range missions that the fuel burn and the sustainability, the eco-friendliness makes the most difference. So much, ladies and gentlemen, for our little product pitch. Thank you for bearing with me here. I just want to conclude before I hand over to Philippe with a repeated plea for more airplanes. Philippe, in particular on the single aisle, as we saw, the recovery is going to come there first. I just want to conclude here by saying, look, I'm a very happy commercial director here at Airbus because I have a product family that offers across the board 25 to 30% step forward in efficiency and therefore sustainability gains. That's even before we put a single drop of SAF, of sustainable aviation fuels, into any of these airplanes that are capable of receiving it. And that's why I sit here with full confidence as we see the beginning of the recovery. There you go. Thank you very much. Happy to answer questions later. Philippe, more airplanes, please.
Thank you very much, Christian. And it's now my pleasure to hand over to our EVP, Head of Programs and Services, Philippe Meur.
Good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My pleasure to be with you. In fact, it was refreshing my mind, you know, Christian, listening to you, because I think we tend to forget what happened in March last year. And in fact, it's true that we had to face the reality. We had to adapt to the pandemic in our daily life. We had to adapt to the pandemic in our working environment, in our company. And we had to adapt it for our customers. And we kept delivering aircraft. And that was very much important. And in fact, you mentioned some of the initiative we took, but we reinvented the way we were operating around the aircraft for protecting social distancing, but also to organize those safe corridors for our customers coming from far away, and where we wanted to ensure them that they would not be impacted by any infected potential people. So these are the safe corridor, including our hotel facility. You mentioned the electronic transfer of title, but also we ferry flew a lot of aircraft to avoid customers were coming from countries where it was difficult to avoid travel restriction to Europe. So we flew a lot of aircraft to China, we flew a lot of aircraft to India, and that was a way for us to deliver on the volume commitment we're having toward our customers. So you mentioned the end result, 566 aircraft, not a walk in the park, but a lot of pride also for our customers to have taken those aircraft in that period of time, and for our collective teams who made it happen, and that was so important in that period, which was so difficult. So perhaps before jumping in some more detail, I mean, you were talking about the rate adaptation decision that we took, and I can just comment the fact that it was a little bit schizophrenic at that time, because you were pushing for more, we didn't want to have too much inventory, and but one reality was that really we had to work with our supplier. And we had to stay connected, because when from almost one day to another, you announced that you would come from a rate 60 to a rate 40 on single aisle, you can imagine that it's creating a lot of issues on their side. And that the first question they were asking is that figure reliable? And at the very early stage of the crisis, it was difficult. We had no crystal ball. Nevertheless, we took a bet. This rate 40 or rate 2 for 330, rate 5 for the 350. And this is something on which we say, okay, we need now to stick to our commitment, at least to give visibility to our supplier for them to organize their downsizing, production sites reorganization, and so on. And this is something that was coming with a lot of communication, and where we're trying through our own acts to convince them that we're serious about those rates, for them to have a kind of a sustainable understanding on what would happen. In the meantime, we organized some watchtower, and it was watchtower about their financial health. It was a watchtower where they were having some transfer of work from one side to another's. And it was also proposing them some support when it was coming to governmental support, for example. So, for example, in France with the Aero Fund, I mean, there was a kind of a opportunity for them to be supported and to transition and to weather the crisis in a kind of a most, in the safest way. So this is the way we try to organize the resilience of our industry, and this is what I think we can say we achieved, and that Airbus was credible with the ecosystem during that period, and that was very important. So this was also for us the way to create the condition to fly out of this crisis. Now it's time for a safe return to service, and this is also an important phase. You can imagine that when more or less half of the fleet in the world was parked, we had to adapt what was a maintenance program for a flying aircraft to what was the given program for a non-flying aircraft, and to try to extend the interval of inspection, this kind of stuff, to help the airlines' economics, protecting the airworthiness of the product. So this is what we did with a lot of support in terms of parking, storage, instruction, and this is something which is important. In the meantime, we had to support them when they anticipated to return their asset into service, and here some objectives. We had to retrain the pilot, we had to retrain the mechanics, we had also to get our inventory level in terms of spare parts back to what it's being required to support the operation of the aircraft, and this is what we did. But what we also did is that we understood also, and the airline commented the fact that the cargo traffic was higher than the one of the passenger, and it was a way for them to use their passenger aircraft in terms of temporary cargo freight. And this is something where we organized temporary cabin solution for them to carry freight in the passenger area, removing the seats. So we certified some temporary solutions, and I think it brought a lot of help to our customers. We help all the aircraft flying over the crisis, and by the way, you commented on the performance of our aircraft that the A220 fleet was the most active fleet in its segment during the crisis, with a minimum of 50% of the aircraft being operated at the lowest point of the crisis and very quickly recovering to higher levels. No need to say that the 320neo, thanks to its efficiency, was the priority aircraft to recover during and in the current time. On the 350-1000, I mean, 100% of the aircraft were very quickly operated. What does it tell? It tells that the product is so efficient that this is the aircraft that the airline wanted to see back in the air. I could make the same comment from the 330neo. Of course, and we talked about it, we decided to adapt our rate, but now, thanks to our kind of modeling of what could happen in the future, confirmed by IATA, ICAO vision, we think that it's time now to ramp up and to emerge from the crisis. So starting with the 220, we are currently at rate 5, combining both Mirabel and Mobile rates. We will go to rate 6 in early 2022, and we are preparing a rate 14 mid of the decade. Let's say that our order book is pretty full, and that we have no issue in terms of open slots and so on. We have open slots quite late now, so this is something which is really something important. On the A320, of course, this is where the ramp up is materializing and where we see the traffic recovering, and so we are currently at rate 40. By the end of the year, we'll reach rate 45. We have a rate 64 by second quarter 23, and we ask the supply chain to work on a scenario of rate 70 by first quarter 24, and even to assess an opportunity for a rate 75 by 2025. So you can imagine that this is done in full conjunction with the supply chain, where the suppliers, where we shared a couple of weeks ago those rates, and where they have now a robust commitment from our side to at least adapt their plan to support such a ramp up, which is good news for the industry overall. In terms of the wide body, 330 and 350, Christian, you commented it. So we see a recovery that will take a little bit more time. So we're going to keep our rate 2 for the 330, and we're going to go from a rate 5 currently to a rate 6 by the last quarter of 2020. I think there is a typo here, last quarter of 2022. So now there is something which is important, is that during the crisis, we decided to protect some key investment. And it was very important. Why? Because we always bet on the fact that there will be an after the crisis. And it was very important that we would be able to match what would be market expectations, but also that we would modernize our industrial system. So a couple of examples before jumping in the final assembly line in Toulouse. One of them is that we decided and we confirmed the fact that aerostructure was part of our core business, and that for our structure in France and Germany, we'd have two specific entity, but also that we wanted to create a champion of detailed parts in Germany. So that's something which is important, but we wanted also to prepare a more industrial and production flexibility. And this is where we decided to launch this final assembly line in Toulouse, bringing on top of additional 320 capacity, the 321 capability in Toulouse, which would help to debottleneck a little bit what we were experiencing in the past in Hamburg, and recognizing that the market share of the 321 is growing and growing and being higher than 50% very soon now in our product portfolio. So this is a typical example of what we want to achieve in terms of a seamless flow for our future final assembly line here. You see that there will be a lot of benefit from two dimensions. One, which is the digital continuity, allowing them to automatize, robotize some of the activity of the final assembly line. So these are two dimensions that we protected. We protected, of course, the DDMS project. I will come back on it. But at the same time, we developed some new capabilities in terms of robotization, digital continuity, and so on. So it will help to optimize the flow within our overall industrial system and to match the higher rates that we are experiencing right now. Now, let's talk about 321 XLR. What an aircraft. Yeah, you saw with this video that now it comes for real. I mean, this is not only, plans, DMU, no, this is the parts that we start to pre-assemble and that will lead to flight test in 2022 and to an entry into service of the aircraft in 2023. So here we are getting ready. You saw some of the most advanced piece of work is the rear center tank, which is being assembled now, but also section 15 and section 17 being assembled. You understood that we have some pilot line to develop the specifics on the 321 XLR compared to the flow of 321, which are more the standard today. On top of the DMS, we relied a lot of demonstrator, for physical demonstrator to mature the industrial process that would be needed for the XLR. That's very true for the rear center tank, but not only, and you commented already the benefits in terms of maxi takeoff weights, in terms of range of the aircraft. This is something which is very important. But again, I mean, we'll be all happy to meet you for the entry into service of the aircraft in 2023. DDMS, so our Digital Design, Manufacturing and Services project, aims to ensure digital continuity for our end-to-end developments. And this is a great enabler, of course, for the single-aisle family to benefit from 3D environment, DMU. And I can tell you that we see that the number of non-conformity during the development phase, which is normal, you need to mature the design, was reduced by 4 compared to a previous development. And this is thanks to the DMU benefits and what we gain from DDMS. Of course, it's a way also to capitalize on the family effect. So developing some of the basic system that we can reuse, would it be in harness installation, would it be in cabin installation? So there is a huge benefit, and also you have the proper data to optimize your industrial flow and to robotize or automatize some of the steps of the manufacturing process. And this is something which is very much important. So I think you understand through the XLR, the DMS, but not only that, even at the deepest crisis, we protected a lot of our key projects for the future. So airspace, you mentioned it, delivered on time. XLR is going to fly next year. On the 350, where we had some maxi takeoff weight, so some weight increase to deliver some more capability to the product. And this is something that we kept in our investment despite the crisis and despite the depth of the crisis. Now, let's turn into our latest development. So you commented the capability of the 330 today, but last year we delivered the first -800, 330-800 to Kuwait Airways in October 2020. And in March this year, we delivered the first 251-ton version to Corsair, which of course is bringing a lot of capability to the product. The second thing that we need to say is that the A330-900 was the first ever aircraft to have received the EASA CO2 certification in May 21. In terms of the 350 latest development, again, I mean some maxi takeoff weight increase for the -900, so the 280 ton. Same for the -1000 with a 319 ton. And some more weight-saving initiatives coming with what we call the Step 7. But we also extended the capability of Tianjin in terms of completion and delivery center for China. It means that now we have combined capability of 330 and 350. So we install the cabin, we paint the aircraft, we flight test the aircraft over there to deliver one of the biggest markets for our aviation industry, which is China. And we are very proud of this partnership with our Chinese partner, which delivered a lot of single-aisle aircraft last year, but which now is also delivering our state-of-the-art A350 aircraft. Talking about now sustainability, and before jumping in some more concrete example, I think that we need to be very clear. We are ready now to address the challenges of what sustainability means for the aviation industry for the years and the decades to come. You commented it, Christian, but when we are looking at each and every of our product, more or less we have a benefit which is between 20 and 30% fuel consumption, a benefit of the same order of magnitude for CO2 emission, and in most of the cases, 50% reduction of the NOx emission. So this is something which is already what we can deliver today. The next step has to do with the sustainable aviation fuel being ready. All our products are being certified for a 50% blend of SAF, which is already bringing, compared to standard kerosene, a 40% benefit in terms of emissions. I need to mention also that when we're talking about the level of emission we're talking about, only 12% of the in-service fleet are at this level of technology. So it means that replacing old aircraft with new aircraft will bring some additional benefit in the future, and you can imagine that this is part also of our plan. We have a part of it which is also supported by services capability, and here the digital dimension is very important. I will comment on it later. So SAF, we're SAF ready, but is it sufficient? For sure it's not. Sorry. We had some commitment in some of the Paris Agreement and so on to reduce the emission, and you see here where we are. So since 1990, we reduced by 50% the level of emission per passenger per kilometer, and this is a huge achievement already. What were the driver of it? I mean, it's optimized aerodynamics, it's advanced materials, and it was next-gen engines. You commented on the NEO, on the 350, and this is where we are. And again, keep in mind those 88% still flying, not reaching those technological standards. What we can say also is that now we have the road to a net zero emission by 2050, 2060 would need an additional effort. And it's not more of the same. It's to have the plan right now to be ready to be able to deliver in 2035 or a bit later, the technology that would reach the expectation in terms of net zero emission. And it will come, of course, with new engine, new aircraft technology, sustainable aviation fuel, and you see that it could bring a 50% benefit by itself, and the rest of it could be a combination of 8% thanks to ATM and aircraft operations, and 42% related to technology topics. So this is where we are. We are very active in maturing the brick of technology that are emerging from some other industry, and to combine them and to be ready to have an integrated product being ready for the high standard of certification that we're having in our industry. And this is what we are doing. So we're not starting from a white sheet of paper. We're capitalizing on some of the other industry benefits. And this is where I want to comment that the challenge for the aviation has to do with a wider ecosystem. So you can imagine that sustainable aviation fuel will come with production, distribution of sustainable aviation fuel. It would be the same with hydrogen, because we are thinking about benefit of hybrid solutions for this next generation product. It will come with demonstrator, and we're already having some demonstrator. It will come with partnership. It will come with some initiatives where we would measure, for example, the benefit of hydrogen. Of course, we know in terms of CO2 emission, which are known, but in terms also of contribution to vapor and so on. So this is where we need to gain knowledge and where we need to mature the technology. So we have a clear path for a decarbonized aircraft. I think we have a technology roadmap which is being ready now. And And what I want to comment is that the next program at some point in time will not be a 10% benefit from engine or even higher value. It has to be a step change, and this is what Airbus is preparing for. So it's going to be a journey in parallel of having some incremental improvement of our current portfolio. We are working hard on paving the way for this net zero emission future, and this is what zero emission is about. And voilà, we are ready. We are ready to have this wonderful journey with the wider ecosystem. So this is our ambition, you understand. So if I'm summarizing, we have the right product. We believe in our products. It's already delivering a lot of value to our customers. We still invest in our current product and services portfolio, but for sure, we are in parallel developing the maturity of the technology, which are being required to support zero net emission by 2050, with a launch potentially in the middle of the next decade. And for that, we have a purpose in the company, which is we pioneer sustainable aerospace for a safe and united world. A last word, pioneering comes with passion, and I hope that you felt our passion, Christian and I, for our company, our product, and our customer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philippe. Thank you very much, Christian. And this leads us over to the Q&A session. And we have a short reminder how the Q&A session works. So you have the possibility to put a question forward in the chat function or raise your hand, and your question will be selected and put into the flow. We will try to consider as many questions as possible in the remaining time. And by the way, we have over 130 journalists connected as we speak. And we see journalists connected from Asia, as far as also US West Coast. So welcome to all of you. And it's a pleasure now to take your first Q&A. And the first question goes to Richard Schurman from Air Insight, who is saying that suppliers are fully committed to the A320neo family ramp up. To which rate are they committed? Rate 64, rate 70, or rate 75? Maybe this is a question for you, Philippe.
I can take it. So for sure, the rate 64 is a commitment. The rate 70 is a scenario that we ask them to further investigate, but this is a kind of a longer-term view. And 75 is an investigation. You understood from my colleague Christian that he would love that we'll be able to deliver, but we need to understand what are the drivers, what are the bottlenecks, and this is what we wanted to trigger, to have the right topic on the table, to be sure that we would be able to either debottleneck, address them, and then reconsider the rates if needed. But consider 64 and 70 as really our journey, and 75 as an investigation.
Next question. Can we please bring up the next question? Then we have a question from Canada coming. Julien Arsenault, La Presse. What A220 cost reduction initiatives have been put in place, and when will break even be?
Bonjour, Julien. What I can comment is that, of course, when we took over the 220 program, cost reduction was part of it. I think that it was a wider picture. We were bringing, the credibility of Airbus as a player. Your team, Christian, were bringing, the sales capacity, the sales force that you are having, and we committed to some of the elements. One of them had to do with cost reduction, with two main dimensions. One has to do with renegotiation with some of the suppliers, and here we were leveraging the kind of trust that we are creating in Airbus being the partner, the trust that the supplier were also having in Christian's team. So in fact, they were betting on higher volumes. And in exchange, you can, of course, expect some lower cost of their work packages. The second axis has to do with what we call design to cost. So it's either design to manufacture, or it's to further extend standardization between some of the current Airbus product and the A220 products. And a lot has to do with optimization. So what we can say is that we're on track with our initial expectation in terms of what we can reach. A slight pause, because of course the pandemic created a little bit of pause by some of our suppliers, a lot of co-working with our suppliers. So this is the only probably slowdown that we experienced, but more or less on track. And we still continue to bet on the product. We still continue to invest on the product. And it's going to be an important pillar, you understood it, in our portfolio strategy. So yeah, be sure that we will bring the aircraft where it has to be a profitable product.
Thank you very much, Philip. And now we have a live question from Sebastian Steinke from the German Flugrevue magazine. Sebastian.
Hello, thanks very much for the briefing. I have a question concerning the XLR, please. Your competitor has mentioned that he has some concerns concerning the tank safety. Is this something you work on? Is this something you consider the certification possibly be delayed because of it? Or is this something to just go on and something expected? And speaking of the success of the 321, when is the moment to stretch it another time beyond the XLR, and what would be needed to do it? Thank you.
So I'm going to take the certification point. So I mean, first of all, you know, commenting on the technical challenging, safety challenging of a competition is very weird to me. But what I can tell you is that we have a plan, a certification plan, with our authority, with the EASA, with FAA, which is of course addressing these additional tanks, this rear center tank that we're having, which is a structural tank. So yes, we have some demonstration. This is a normal certification process, and yeah, let's address it. Let's demonstrate the safety of it. It's a structural tank, so structural tanks are flying forever on aircraft. In the center wing box of most of the aircraft, you have fuel in it. So I think that we have to address the latest certification requirement. That's fine, we'll do so.
From my perspective, I can tell you there's no concern out in the marketplace from our operators regarding our ability to certify the XLR and its tanks. So I put it on the account of a, yeah, maybe slightly provocative and outdated comment by somebody smart in our competitor. So no concern there. Regarding the stretch, here again, I wish I had more earlier availability of the existing A321neo, the A321LR, and the XLR. I do not feel that there is a need at this particular point to stretch the airplane, and unless you have something hidden on the drawing board, Philippe, I don't have it in my catalogue.
Thank you, Christian. This in part already answering the next question we have received from John Walton. He is representing the Runway Girl Network today. How has the A321neo market evolved since the pandemic? You answered already on the stretch.
It really hasn't evolved much, if perhaps only towards a consolidation of the fact that the market is wholeheartedly endorsing the A321. Think about it this way: if you're a large operator of A320s, the next logical step in your unit cost reduction and capability and network development is the A321. So quite naturally, we have seen over time a migration from the smaller modules of the family to the larger modules. And we really haven't seen a structural change in that pattern through the pandemic. Regarding the 322, I think we answered the question. There is no such thing.
Thank you, Christian. And we have received several requests by media on our A350 freighter plans. What is cooking?
Yeah, that's a good question. The freighter market has been put to the forefront through the pandemic because freight is the only thing that was flying in significant quantities as airplanes, as people, pardon me, were restricted from flying. So that has somewhat exacerbated the fact that the freighter market is underserved by Airbus today. And yes, what do we do when we react, when we realize something? Well, we try to react to it. Now, I must give some of our customers credit here because on the one hand, to answer this question, on the one hand, the market has told us, and many customers has told us, Airbus, you've been a formidable force in this industry, introducing competition and new technologies. Please do so on the freighter market as well. Now, that's an important message to take into account. And then some others have said, and often the same, by the way, have said, look, with the A350, which we now know, do you realize, Airbus, you have a really good platform to transform this airplane into a freighter? Its range capability, its volume, its operating costs, needless to say, but also its structural capability and some of the technological choices you have made to find the right balance between, let's call it metallic structural parts and carbon parts. That gives you a platform that would be a fabulous freighter. So yeah, to some extent we're now reacting to those market forces, and I dare say, Philippe, we have some wind in our sails towards seeing the emergence of an A350 freighter as we consolidate our studies and our business case.
Question from Orient Aviation coming in. Tom Ballantyne, based in Sydney. As you come out of the pandemic, how will you expand staff numbers again? And are there any concern on lost expertise from your previous adaptation?
So first of all, we had an approach which was a little bit asymmetric between our mechanics, our blue collar, where we decided to leverage the scheme provided by the government in terms of long-term partial employment. So on purpose, we decided to reduce working time to protect the workforce because of the objective you were just mentioning. We wanted to keep them on board because we knew even if the crisis was lower for longer, the market will restart again and we would need the workforce, the qualified workforce. So this is a part of the answer. On the other side, you can imagine that the rate we are talking about in terms of the single aisle will require that we would hire, and here we will go through standard training, qualification processes. And this is something that, again, not only for Airbus, but also for our supply chain, giving visibility on this rate increase is providing them with the opportunity to have the right qualified workforce for them to be trained. So this is exactly an additional reason why we shared those objectives with our supply chain.
Next question is coming in from Shukor Yusuf, Endo Analytics, based in Singapore. How do you plan to approach the weakening situation at AirAsia, Garuda, Lion Air, etc., who between them have ordered over 300 aircraft and are unlikely to take delivery? Christian, I believe this is for you.
Okay, I'll take that. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we have addressed proactively the consequences of the pandemic with every one of our customers. And these very good partners included. Now, I also said we're an industrial company. We're not in the business of building inventory. So you have to imagine that we're not building airplanes for customers, partners who are not able to take delivery of them. And that is precisely what we're doing with those cases that remain as yet to be restructured. You mentioned a few. We have great relationships with the customers you mentioned, and we're in active discussions with them to restructure their contracts. Let's call a spade a spade. That's what we're doing. I'm happy to add that as I stand here today, Airbus has no unsold inventory that is not either in extremely advanced stages of negotiation or already under contract or MOU.
Thank you, Christian. Very clear. Now we have again several journalists based on the briefing we have seen yesterday from CFM. What is Airbus' view on the CFM RISE engine, and will this engine equip the future Zero-E or single-aisle aircraft? Philip, maybe one for you.
Yes, so first of all, let's clarify. I mean, RISE is a demonstrator, a technology demonstrator. So, and here I can tell you that we welcome all the initiative from the engine manufacturer to mature technology for to achieve the ambition that I described earlier ago. We like also that they are making them fuel source agnostic. So it means that this is the kind of technology that could be compatible with SAF, that could be compatible with hydrogen, and this is really more than welcome. So again, we love the industry to mature technology for a purpose which is this zero emission ambition that we all have. So more than welcome.
Thank you very much. Do we have the next question? Ken Paul from the Skies magazine in Canada. How has the acquisition of the A220 benefited Airbus's product portfolio? Christian, I think this is for you.
Well, I'm sure Philippe may have a comment on this as well, but for me, yeah, it's a very beneficial addition at the lower end, lower not in quality but in size, at the lower end of our product portfolio. As I believe I mentioned, Airbus has not had its eyes on the, let's call it, regional market segments. And with the A220, we do have a foot in that regional market space, and that's just a natural addition to our product portfolio. On top of that, it's a very modern airplane. And so in that segment, you can consider it the most modern stepping stone you can imagine towards that ultimate goal of sustainable aviation. It's the most modern airplane out there.
And it's also contributing to increasing the intimacy we have with our customer. The more product you have, the more intimacy you have, and then the more suitable solution you package together for them. And I think you brought some examples. I think that we have many examples like this where 220 joined another member of the Airbus family, and that's really rich.
Thank you very much, Philip. We stay on the A220. The Aerotelegraph is asking, you have lost some recent A220 campaigns because you can't deliver them fast enough. How do you plan to tackle this problem? Says Aerotelegraph.
Well, I'm unaware, sorry, Stefan, I'm unaware that we have lost any recent A220 campaigns. Well, that may be worrisome in itself, that I shouldn't be aware. I'm aware of campaigns where we have not engaged or have not been asked to engage, but I would dispute the fact that the A220 has recently lost campaigns.
Thank you. Very clear. Then we have a question from China coming in, from Yunao Kuang, Fatih Aviation. What plans are there to stretch the A220 now? Has a Chinese carrier expressed an interest in the A220?
Yes, there has been expressions of interest for the A220 in China. And by the way, a good portion of the fuselage is built in China. So yes, there is interest for the 220 in China, particularly in the regions of China that are outside of the mainstream of the bulk routes, so I'm happy to confirm there is. Regarding the stretch, the airplane has the capability of being stretched, but before it is stretched, it will reach its cruising altitude.
Again, coming back, several journalists, when would we make the decision to launch an A350 freighter?
As soon as we're done with the business case, Philippe?
Yes. Yeah. And when launching conditions are met. I mean.
Okay, thanks very much. What kind of pressures do you see on aircraft pricing as the market recovers? Comes from multiple journalists. What is, Christian, I think you were elaborating on this on the A320. Do we have also general statements on aircraft pricing?
Yeah, that's of course always a touchy subject. What I'd like to say on this is that if you tolerate a little bit of bragging yet, that we very nicely matched supply and demand on our products. So as a consequence, we don't have a yard sale to conduct. We also have a huge backlog to manage. And as I showed earlier, we have over 7,000 airplanes, or roughly 7,000 airplanes in backlog. The vast majority of those are single-aisle airplanes, of course. It is that value that we're seeking to protect. So is there pricing pressure for the various reasons we all know? Yes, there is. I'm asking the question in return, if you're matched between supply and demand of your products, if you have the lion's share of the airplane's backlog out there, your focus, commercial focus, must be more on protecting that value than chasing price. And you can do that when you have a premium product out there in the market. And we're happy to have those products.
A question by Air Insight, Richard Schumann. How will Tianjin contribute to the ramp up, and to which rates can they go? China outlook, Philip.
Yes, for sure. Tianjin will contribute, and in the ramp up, when I'm looking to 23 and so on, a rate 6 in Tianjin is something that we're looking at, and this is the way they will contribute.
Good. Then we have a question by Sylvia Pfeiffer on WTO. What is the current status and how would we see what is coming today out of Brussels?
Well, let me take a stab at that. The news coming out of Brussels, or noises coming out of Brussels, seem to indicate a convergence. From Airbus's perspective, we clearly welcome that. Anything that levels the playing field in this highly competitive industry and avoids this terrible lose-lose proposition of tariffs across the Atlantic, or across any borders for that matter, is good. And you don't need to take that from Airbus as a fairly obvious statement for us to make. Just ask our customers, ask the market whether airlines are in favor of tariffs here and there. No, obviously they're not. So anything that substantiates a long-term, over time, convergence between the two sides of the Atlantic on this is, from my perspective, really good news.
Then we have, again, several journalists asking, what is our view on supersonic air travel?
We loved the Concorde, didn't we?
Yeah, we loved it. No, I think that it's a question you understood in our plans, that when you fight for next generation, zero emissions, and so on, and when it's part of your priority and you want to make it part of your DNA, supersonic is not one of the priority. So that's my only comment.
Thank you very much. Then we have a live question by Sebastian Steinke again from the German Flugrevue magazine. Sebastian?
You mentioned, yes, hello. I'd like to ask about commonality, please. You mentioned the A220, and I agree with a very positive outlook, but I wonder, isn't the cockpit of the A220 a little different from the A321 family? So would you possibly create a different cockpit which is more like the rest of your family, or is this a problem for you in the future? And again, on the commonality, the production of the 220, is it similar enough to the rest of the Airbus production, or as you have taken over a ready-made product, can it be adopted to become really smooth Airbus-style production, especially when it comes to high rates? Thanks very much.
Okay. Okay, Sebastian, danke. Let me ask maybe the first part and Philippe the second part. On the cockpit commonality, you're correct. We don't have the CCQ, the full commonality between the 220 and the 320. I'm happy to say that has not proven to be a major handicap. Because there is no commonality that is anywhere close to what we already have in terms of philosophy, cockpit philosophy between a 220 and a 320. There isn't any such commonality between other solutions, between the regional or upper regional segment and lower mid-size segment. So it's really not a handicap. In fact, it's a slight advantage because the philosophy is similar. I will dare say, under your control, Philippe, that we currently have no plans to revamp and therefore change the value proposition of either the 220 or the 320 to construct a common cockpit. That's not to say that it won't converge over time, but there currently is no hard plan to do so.
Sebastian, a convergence of the industrial system. So first of all, let's recognize that when the A220 was designed, it was designed for a given rate ambition. And you realize now that when I'm talking about a rate 14 by the middle of the decade, here, of course, we need to streamline the production. So I'm going to take a couple of examples. A fact, a given. We have Mobile, Alabama. So this is what we used as our US base to deliver A220 from the US. And you can imagine that the way we set up the final assembly line at a very early stage, it was installed in the A220 final assembly line, by the way. Now it's another one, but it's very similar in the concept to what we're using. The next step is probably what we call the pre-FAL, the pre-final assembly line, where we integrate the cabin, where we have some more integration just before the final assembly issue. So we are investing right now in Mirabel, taking benefit of room being left by the CRG production being stopped, and where we have this pre-FAL being organized. And this is something which is, of course, that will contribute to streamline the production of the A220 family.
Thank you very much. Then we have again several journalists asking. We know from the semiconductor shortage in the automotive industry. Is it also affecting us as an aircraft manufacturer?
Not at all to the same extent. You can imagine that thanks to our planning, our demand, and the low volume compared to automotive, for example, we are very well protected in terms of the buffer. And here we have a part of our discussion with the suppliers. I mean, some kind of a secured pipe to support our operation. So we don't see it as a danger in the frame of our future production.
Thank you very much. Then we have Luis Calvo from the Spanish Fly News magazine. You indicated 80% of delivery slots had been rejected. How many aircraft are now in storage or parked? Christian, you had earlier comments.
Okay. Gracias for the question, Luis. Number of airplanes that are parked and in storage has to be taken very carefully, because a good number, I think about half of the airplanes that you see parked around Toulouse or Hamburg are airplanes that have actually already been paid. We have a number of transactional solutions with some of our customers that enables us to actually deliver the airplanes, and then the customer is entrusting us, Philippe's people, with the storage of the airplane that they find is best done by the OEM. The real question, I think, behind your question is, do we have whitetails? And the answer is, but for less than you can count on my hand here, the answer is no.
Thank you very much. Then we have Greg Pollack from AIN. When do you intend to develop an eVTOL aircraft for commercial operations?
It's being developed. There are, if I may, Philippe, jump it, but there are several scenarios, several initiatives that are being worked on by a very dedicated team between the various divisions of our company. So the answer is, as we speak.
Good. Thanks very much. And then this closes our... No, Björn Ferm from Lihem is coming in. Where is the hydrogen program, and why did you say entry into service 2035 or a little bit later? I heard only 2035, but happy to listen at the tape again.
No, we are again, I mean, we are maturing technology. Hydrogen comes with a lot of challenges. Of course, from the energetic standpoint, it's very valuable. From the volume standpoint, you have to store the hydrogen, so cryogenic solution for tanks for hydrogen are being worked now with 2 centers of excellence, one in France, one in Germany. And then you need to, hydrogen is the source, and then it's how you use it, either as like you would use kerosene or for more hybrid solutions. So again, we are maturing a parallel path, so we're on track. I think you're right that I say 2035, but I think target is 2035. So here, this is what we have in our plan. We're all working for such an availability and maturing, demonstrating technology along that way.
Next question is coming from Bruno Trevedic, Les Echos in France. Have you lost orders due to the US-EU tariff dispute? Christian, maybe this is for you.
Thanks, Bruno. A typical Bruno question, I must say. I wouldn't put it exactly that way. Let me elaborate. The tariffs coincidentally came when we had a competitor who was seriously disrupted, and those aggressive stances emanating from our competitor abated when our competitor could start to deliver airplanes again. So it is really more on the other side that you must see the timing and the consequences that drive this decision. What I can say is that whilst maybe we haven't lost orders per se, because in the meantime there was the pandemic, certainly it has disrupted the marketplace and it has upset a number of customers on both sides of the Atlantic. And an upset customer, a customer who feels that his ability to trade and to procure freely is hampered, an upset customer is never a good thing to have for anybody, any supplier.
Thank you very much. Then we have David Kaminski from the Flight magazine. To what extent are you considering using composite wings on current single-aisle programs?
David, we are very happy with the current wing. So I think it would come back to 322 or whatever. What is true is that we again, part of the techno bricks that we want to further mature, demonstrator, we have a Wing of the Future program. But I can tell you that very happy with our combination of a current wing, current engine. So
Thank you very much. Do we have any other question in the room? From Aero.de coming in, where does Airbus stand on the A350 1000 ULR for the Qantas Sunrise project?
It is exactly where we left it off, and with our good friends at Qantas, we're hoping to be able to hit the defrost button on that project as soon as possible, Philippe.
And when I mentioned some of the development on the 350, I commented on some weight-saving initiatives that for sure will benefit to the mission capability of the aircraft for Sydney-Europe route, for sure.
Thank you very much. This concludes our Q&A session. This concludes our media briefing. Dear Christian, dear Philippe, thank you very much for being available today, presenting to our audience of more than 130 journalists connecting from all over the world. We are very pleased to have you here in the room, and we will connect with another Airbus session with you shortly. Stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your interest.
Thank you.